There comes a moment in every life when something silently breaks away. Not with fireworks, not with a loud announcement, but with a quiet unease that whispers, "This no longer belongs to you." It's the sense that the chapter you've been reading no longer makes sense, even though the words on the page are the same. And if you've been feeling that, you're not broken. You're awakening. What's collapsing is not your life. It's the outdated script you've been forced to carry. The collapse of an old timeline is not disaster. It's not punishment. It is the dismantling of a framework that no longer serves who you are becoming. Yet because we've been trained to fear change, our first instinct is to call it loss, failure, catastrophe. But pause and look deeper. What if this is the ground clearing itself so something stronger can take root? What if the life you thought was falling apart is actually making room for a truer version of you to emerge? Think about the bridges we build out of old blueprints. Relationships based on who we used to be. Careers chosen from outdated expectations. Habits formed in environments that no longer exist. For a while, those structures carry us. But eventually, the ground beneath shifts. The bridge no longer fits. And when it collapses, it feels like betrayal. In truth, it's an invitation. Life is saying, stop crossing the old bridge and begin constructing the one that belongs to where you are now. Most people miss this signal because they've been conditioned to normalize discomfort. They push through the ache in their chest. Silence the thought that says, "This isn't right." Scroll past the moments of disconnection. But ignoring the collapse doesn't stop it. It only delays the inevitable. The ones who step into transformation are those who pause, pay attention, and honor the cracks. You don't need to fix everything in that moment. You don't need to have a grand plan. What you need is awareness, to notice the places where your energy feels drained instead of alive, to admit, without judgment, that certain routines, certain conversations, even certain identities, no longer fit the person you're becoming. That recognition is not weakness, it's clarity, and clarity is power. When the old timeline collapses, the body feels it before the mind catches up. Anxiety rises, restlessness spreads, a heaviness hangs in the chest. Instead of running, ground yourself. Breathe. Plant your feet. Let the nervous system know that this shift is survivable, because it is. You're not here to stay the same. You're here to evolve, and once you see the collapse for what it really is, not an ending, but a release, you can begin to experiment. Small actions, new choices, gentle pivots. Rearranging your morning, saying no where you used to say yes, trying on a different perspective. These tiny decisions create ripples, and ripples become waves. So, recognize this truth. The quiet collapse is not here to destroy you. It is here to free you. It is life placing the old story in your hands and asking, will you keep carrying this, or will you finally set it down? Every timeline you've ever lived was built on thought. Not random thought, but patterned thought. Ideas repeated so often they became unquestionable truths. You've said to yourself, "This is who I am. This is what I do. This is how the world works." And over time, those thoughts didn't just describe your life, and they scripted it. They held you inside a story that felt unshakable. But when an old timeline begins to collapse, the first cracks appear inside those very thoughts. Suddenly, the sentences you've lived by no longer feel solid. The beliefs that once carried you start to sound hollow. It's easy to think your world is falling apart. But what's really breaking is the authority of the old story. Thought was the architect, and now the architecture is giving way. This can be terrifying because the mind has a way of clinging to the familiar, even when the familiar is suffocating. You've seen it in yourself, repeating the same complaint, playing the same argument, telling yourself the same excuse. Those loops feel safe because they're known, but the collapse begins when you start to hear those loops for what they are, echoes, not truth. When you finally pause and witness your thoughts, you realize something profound. They aren't commands, they're habits, and habits can be reshaped. Imagine living 30 years under the assumption that you must always put others first, or that you're not capable of achieving something greater. Those phrases, repeated silently, weave into your nervous system until they feel like reality itself. But when the old timeline dissolves, that inner whisper shows up. Do you really believe this anymore? And for the first time, you hesitate. That hesitation is freedom cracking open. The key is to stop fighting thought and start questioning it. Instead of reacting to every fear or judgment, step back and see the machinery. Ask yourself, is this thought supporting the life I'm creating? Or is it rebuilding the one I've already outgrown? That question alone can shift the direction of your day. Because once you recognize that thought isn't destiny, you can begin choosing which ones to energize. This is where the disintegration of the old story becomes powerful. It doesn't vanish overnight. It unravels as you withdraw attention from the narratives that no longer serve you. Each time you catch yourself about to repeat an old line, "I can't, I shouldn't, it's too late," you interrupt it with a different possibility. Not a grand declaration, but a subtle redirection. What if I can? What if I should? What if it's not too late at all? That's how a new script begins. And here's the truth. Thought will either keep you in fragments, replaying the same timeline, or it will be the very tool that allows you to construct a new one. The collapse is not an enemy. It is an invitation to watch the old thoughts lose their grip. When you finally see them as fading echoes instead of absolute truths, you no longer live inside their cage. You step outside the script, into the space where new meaning can form, and in that space a new timeline is waiting. When the old story collapses, something unsettling happens. You're left standing in the space between what was and what is not yet. This space feels raw, almost unbearable, because it has no structure. The familiar walls are gone and the new walls haven't been built. It's the groundless territory where nothing makes sense and everything feels uncertain. Most people run from this space because the human mind craves certainty. Even if that certainty is painful, it would rather cling to a broken past than face the silence of the unknown. But the unknown is not your enemy. It is the fertile ground of transformation. Think of it like a seed buried in the soil. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. The seed is hidden, invisible, surrounded by darkness. Yet inside, a silent revolution is taking place. The old form is breaking down so a new form can emerge. That's what happens to you when you're in this space between timelines. The old self is dissolving, and though you can't see the new self clearly, the process is already underway. The difficulty lies in how uncomfortable it feels. You'll want to fill the silence with noise, distract yourself with busyness, or even retreat back into the old story because at least it was predictable. But every time you resist the unknown, you delay the new timeline. The unknown must be entered, not avoided. This is the passage every transformation requires, the courage to live inside a question without rushing for the answer. Some call it the void. Some call it the wilderness. Others simply call it being lost. But what if you stopped labeling it as failure and started seeing it as preparation? You are being emptied out, not abandoned. The ground beneath you is not crumbling to destroy you. It's shifting to make room for something larger than you've ever allowed yourself to carry. There is a paradox here. The unknown feels like chaos, yet it's the most ordered process in existence. Think about every great transition in life: birth, growth, renewal. Before each stage, there is a period where the old structure breaks down, and for a moment, nothing seems stable. That instability isn't a mistake. It's proof that a new form is trying to emerge. So when you find yourself in that uneasy silence, instead of demanding answers, breathe into the uncertainty. Remind yourself, this is what transformation feels like. You are not lost. You are between. You are not breaking. You are becoming. The unknown is the threshold, and though it feels like emptiness, it is actually fullness waiting to be revealed. Because here's the truth. Every new timeline is born in this space. Not when you have all the answers, not when the path is clear, but when you dare to remain in the discomfort long enough for the seed to crack open. What looks like nothing happening is, in fact, the most important moment of all. When a new timeline begins to unfold, the greatest resistance you will face isn't from the outside world. It's from the part of you still gripping the old self. This is the hidden weight that slows your movement forward. It shows up as old, Identities, outdated beliefs, and familiar patterns that feel safe even though they no longer serve you. And unless you release this weight, you cannot fully step into the new. Think of it like carrying a heavy backpack filled with things you no longer need. At one point in your journey, those items were necessary. They kept you secure. They gave you direction. They even defined you. But now, as you move into unfamiliar terrain, the weight becomes unbearable. The backpack doesn't serve you anymore. It holds you back. The problem is, most people cling to the weight because it represents who they were, and if they drop it, they fear they won't know who they are. This is the paradox of transformation. To find out who you really are, you have to let go of who you thought you were. That means releasing roles that no longer fit, forgiving yourself for choices made in the past, and loosening your grip on identities that were built for a chapter that has already ended. It's not about denying your past. It's about refusing to let it dictate your future. The difficulty lies in attachment. Human beings don't just hold on to things hold on to us. Old stories replay in the mind, whispering lies that say, "You can't change. You'll always be this way. Nothing new is possible." But those voices are echoes from an expired timeline. They sound loud because they're familiar, not because they're true. Releasing the old self is an act of trust. Trust that who you are becoming is more powerful than who you have been. Trust that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means clearing space for something greater. Imagine trying to step through a doorway while dragging a piece of furniture that doesn't fit. You'll get stuck until you set it down. That's what happens with transformation. You cannot carry the old into the new. There's a deep freedom that comes when you begin to let go. At first, it feels like loss. It feels like pieces of you are being stripped away. But with time, you realize that what you lost wasn't you. It was the mask, the armor, the outdated version of yourself that kept you small. What remains after the release is lighter, clearer, more aligned with the path that's waiting for you. The collapse of an old timeline isn't punishment. It's liberation. The moment you drop the old weight, you feel it immediately. A breath of space, a surge of energy, a clarity you didn't know was possible. That's the signal that you're no longer chained to who you were. You're free to become who you're meant to be. Attention is not passive. It is the most powerful tool you carry. What you consistently notice, what you feed with your awareness, becomes the architecture of your reality. Most people don't realize this, so they scatter their attention across distractions, negativity, and fear, and then wonder why life feels chaotic. But once you understand that attention is not simply observing reality but actively sculpting it, everything changes. Think of a sculptor standing before a block of marble. The final masterpiece does not appear all at once. It emerges from repeated intentional strikes of the chisel. Your attention works the same way. Every thought you return to, every feeling you allow to expand, every detail you give weight to, these are the chisels carving the form of your reality. With each moment of focus, you are folding the raw material of experience into a specific shape. The challenge is that most people give their attention unconsciously. They replay problems, they magnify limitations, they obsess over what they lack, and in doing so they sculpt those very conditions into permanence. They don't see that their own awareness has been hijacked. But when you consciously direct attention toward what you desire, toward possibility, toward gratitude and vision, you bend reality itself into alignment with that focus. This is not abstract philosophy. It is practical mechanics. Where attention goes, energy flows. Where energy flows, form emerges. It's why two people can live through the same event and walk away with completely different experiences, because one placed attention on loss, while the other placed attention on opportunity. The event didn't define them. Their attention did. Here's the power in this. You don't need to control everything outside of you. You don't need to rearrange the entire world. You need only master the discipline of where you place your attention. By doing so, you're already rearranging the field of possibility around you. Each day becomes an act of sculpting, a slow folding of reality into coherence with your inner vision. But discipline is required. Attention will drift if, left unchecked, pulled toward noise and distraction. That's why it must be reclaimed deliberately every day. Simple practices like beginning the morning with a clear intention, pausing to recenter when you feel scattered, or writing down the vision you want to live, become ways of shaping the marble. Over time, the form emerges with clarity, a reality sculpted by choice, not by accident. So ask yourself, what are you giving your attention to? Is it chaos or creation? Fear or possibility? Lack or abundance? Because whatever you choose, reality will fold itself accordingly. You are the sculptor, and attention is your chisel. The block of marble is already in front of you. The question is whether you will let life carve you by default, or whether you will step forward and carve consciously. This is where timelines truly shift, not by waiting, but by sculpting with the only tool that never leaves your hands, your attention. Real change doesn't unfold in silence, it emerges in dialogue. Not just dialogue with other people, but also the dialogue you hold within yourself and with the situations that surround you. Most people assume dialogue is only about words exchanged with another person, but true dialogue is much deeper. It is the art of listening, questioning, and uncovering the hidden assumptions that keep you repeating the old timeline. The first dialogue is with yourself. This is where transformation either begins or ends. How do you speak to yourself when no one else is listening? Do you affirm your capacity to grow, or do you replay the same limiting scripts? Every "I can't," "I'm not enough," or "this is just how it is" not a description of reality but a conversation you've been having with yourself for years. And those internal conversations keep recreating the same conditions. When you shift the tone of your self-dialogue, when you begin asking, "What if I can? What if something new is possible?" you dissolve the old assumptions that were holding your reality in place. The second dialogue is with others. Too often, communication is treated like debate, two sides fighting to be right. But real dialogue isn't about winning. It's about creating space where assumptions can be questioned, where truth can rise that neither side could have reached alone. When you truly listen, not just to reply but to understand, something remarkable happens. Walls fall, clarity rises, and connections deepen. This type of dialogue doesn't just change relationships, it shifts the entire timeline of communities, families, and workplaces. The third dialogue is with situations themselves. Life speaks, but most people aren't listening. Every challenge, every obstacle, every sudden collapse is a kind of conversation. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" begin asking, "What is this showing me? What assumption is this event trying to dissolve?" Situations mirror the inner world. They reveal where you are still carrying fear, doubt, or outdated beliefs. If you learn to enter into dialogue with your circumstances, instead of resisting them, you'll find the guidance you've been searching for is already present. Dialogue is powerful because it is alive. It moves. It unfolds. It reveals what was hidden. In dialogue, the old structures of thought are loosened, and new structures are allowed to emerge. This is why real transformation never happens in isolation. It happens when voices, whether internal or external, are allowed to meet in honesty. The danger of avoiding dialogue is stagnation. Silence, when it's born from fear, keeps assumptions locked in place. But the moment you enter dialogue, whether with yourself, with another, or with life itself, the assumptions begin to crumble. And once they crumble, the new timeline can appear. So, if you want change, don't hide from dialogue. Invite it, seek it, practice it. Because every true conversation is not just an exchange of words, it's an exchange of realities. And in that exchange, the old dissolves and the new becomes possible. Insight alone is not enough. You can see the shift. You can feel the new timeline pressing at the edges of your awareness, but until you embody it, until you act as if it is already real, it remains only an idea. Embodiment is the bridge between the inner vision and the outer world. It's how a possibility becomes lived reality. Too often people stop at the insight stage. They have a powerful realization, a spark of clarity, but then they wait. They wait for conditions to be perfect. They wait for proof. They wait for permission. And while they wait, the energy of the insight fades, and the old timeline reclaims them. The truth is, waiting is another form of fear. The only way to solidify the new is to step into it with action. Embodiment doesn't mean faking. It doesn't mean pretending something is true when it's not. It means aligning your choices, however small, with the direction of the new reality. It means walking as though the bridge is already built, even when you can't yet see the other side. If the new timeline carries the energy of freedom, then you take actions that reflect freedom. If the new timeline carries the energy of abundance, then you speak, plan, and behave in ways that match abundance. This doesn't require grand gestures. In fact, embodiment begins with the smallest of actions. The words you choose in conversation, the way you hold your body, the decisions you make when faced with fear. Each action is like laying a stone on the bridge, slowly making the invisible path solid beneath your feet. Over time, the alignment builds momentum, and what once felt imagined begins to feel inevitable. There's a simple but profound principle here. Your body and your actions train your mind to believe. If you act as though the new timeline is real, your nervous system begins to adapt, your brain rewires itself, and your reality bends to support it. This is why rituals, habits, and daily choices matter. They are not just behaviors, they are declarations to the universe. This is who I am now. This is the timeline I choose. Resistance will rise. The old self will whisper, "This is unrealistic. You're not ready. Go back." But embodiment silences those voices not through argument, but through proof. Every embodied action is evidence that the new is already here. Evidence dissolves doubt faster than words ever could. So ask yourself, what does the version of me living in the new timeline do? How do they wake up in the morning? How do they speak to others? How do they handle fear, opportunity, or challenge? And then, begin to live those answers not someday, but today. Because the moment you embody, the new timeline stops being a possibility and becomes a reality. You are no longer just sensing it, you are living it. And reality, seeing your commitment, will rearrange itself to meet you there. Every time you step toward a new timeline, the old one doesn't just fade quietly into the background. It fights for survival. It throws up defenses, wraps itself in fear, and whispers the language of safety. This resistance is not proof that you're failing. It's proof that you're on the threshold of transformation. Fear and comfort are the last anchors of the past, the final threads tying you to the old script. Resistance often disguises itself as logic. It says, "Be reasonable. Don't risk it. Stay where you are." It cloaks itself in comfort, convincing you that the familiar pain you've lived with is better than the unknown freedom you can't yet see. And because it feels safe, most people surrender to it. They confuse comfort with security, when in truth comfort is the cage that prevents them from stepping into their next chapter. But here's the hidden gift of resistance. It points exactly to where the transformation must occur. Wherever you feel the strongest pull to retreat, that is the doorway you must walk through. Resistance is a map. It highlights the edges of the old story, the places where the old self is clinging hardest. And when you name it for what it is, the power begins to dissolve. Fear isn't a wall, it's energy. And energy can be converted. Instead of seeing fear as a stop sign, begin to treat it as fuel. The same surge of adrenaline that makes your hands shake before a leap is the very power that can push you forward. The body doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. It's the mind that labels it. Change the label, and resistance transforms into momentum. The key is to move through, not around, resistance. Avoidance only strengthens it. Every time you retreat, the old script grows stronger, convincing you that its walls are impenetrable. But when you take even the smallest step into the fear, when you call the person, launch the project, have the conversation, the illusion of safety shatters. You realize the wall was paper thin all along. It's important to understand that comfort is not evil. It simply belongs to yesterday. It once served you. It once protected you. But now it has become outdated armor, heavy and restrictive. Thank it for what it gave you, then set it down. Growth requires new ground, and new ground will always feel uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is not danger. It's proof that you've left the old script behind. Resistance will always be loudest right before the breakthrough. That's the signal. The old script is trying to hold its final ground. Meet it with courage. Name it. Step through it. And in that moment, you'll discover something powerful. The energy that once tried to hold you back now propels you forward. Fear and comfort, when faced directly, transform into fuel. And with that fuel, the new timeline solidifies beneath your feet. A new timeline does not sustain itself automatically. Insight opens the door. Action carries you through it. But without anchors, the old patterns can quietly creep back in. This is why anchoring the new is essential. Every transformation requires supports, rituals that recalibrate your attention, habits that sustain your movement forward, and community that reflects and reinforces the new order. These are the structures that stabilize the shift so it becomes permanent. Rituals are powerful because they signal to both the mind and body, "This is who I am now." A ritual doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be as simple as beginning the morning with a few minutes of silence, setting an intention before the day unfolds, or writing down one action that aligns with your new timeline. These small acts, repeated daily, train your nervous system to expect alignment. Over time, they rewire your sense of identity. What once felt like effort begins to feel natural, automatic, inevitable. Habits take the vision even further. If rituals are symbolic declarations, habits are the lived evidence. A new timeline is not built in grand, sweeping gestures. It is constructed brick by brick through consistent action. Whether it's choosing healthier food, speaking up instead of staying silent, creating instead of consuming, or showing up daily to work on your craft, habits create the momentum that keeps you moving forward. Each habit is a vote for the new self, and every vote counts. But rituals and habits alone are not enough. Humans are not meant to transform in isolation. Community is the mirror that shows us who we are becoming. If you surround yourself with people still living in the old script, you'll feel the pull back into comfort and resistance. But if you place yourself among those who are aligned with growth, who reflect the higher version of you, their presence becomes an anchor. Community normalizes what once felt impossible. It reminds you that you are not alone in the shift. Anchoring also requires patience. The old patterns may attempt to resurface, but anchors prevent them from taking root. When you stumble, and you will, rituals bring you back, habits keep you moving, and community pulls you forward. These supports don't eliminate struggle. They ensure that struggle does not derail you. Remember this: every major transformation in history, every leap in human progress, has been sustained by anchors. Leaders relied on daily practices. Innovators built consistent routines. Movements grew because communities came together. Anchors don't just hold you steady, they multiply your strength. So as you step fully into your new timeline, ask yourself, what ritual will remind me of who I've become? What habit will build evidence of my commitment? What community will reflect and reinforce my higher self? Answer those questions honestly, and you'll find that the shift no longer feels fragile. It feels unshakable. Because the truth is, a new timeline doesn't just need to be entered. It needs to be anchored. And once it is anchored, no collapse of the old can pull you back. You are not just visiting the new. You are living it, rooted in it, and building your future from its foundation.